We'd like to begin the next session, Making India Work. Arun Shourie in conversation with N.Ravi. A small introduction. Arun Shourie is among India's best-known commentators on current and political affairs. Among other portfolios, he held the office of the Minister of Disinvestment, Communications and Information Technology in Atal Bihari Vajpayee's cabinet. He has written over 25 books on a variety of topics, ranging from constitutional law, modern Indian history, religious fundamentalism, governance in India, modern Indian history, religious fundamentalism, and national security. His latest book, Anita Gets Bail, What Are Our Courts Doing? What Can We Do About Them? Is a critique of the functioning and judgments of the Supreme Courts and High Courts. N.Ravi, publisher of the Hindu group of newspapers, was formerly editor and editor-in-chief of the Hindu. His special areas of interest and writing include constitutional and political issues, economic policy, international economy, free speech and human rights, and India-United States relations. Making India Work.
Good afternoon and welcome to this session titled Making India Work, a conversation with Arun Shourie. Arun Shourie, as you know, is a man of many parts, economist, journalist, politician, minister, highly decorated public intellectual, and in the context of this literary festival, the author of over 25 books. We had heard him in the inaugural session and in the first panel underlining the fact that the media and indeed every citizen should stand up courageously against any authoritarian tendencies and against wrongdoing. Arun, there are many issues that we would like to ask you about, but in this fest, let me start with your latest book, Anita Gets Bail. That is the last of your trilogy on the courts. Here, you begin with how a warrant of arrest was issued to produce your wife Anita before an environment court in Faridabad, Haryana, for evading summons that were never served, relating to a house that was never built on a land that she no longer owned. And this case dragged on for 18 months. Looking back, how do you see this case now?
I think that we must look upon all these episodes like delayed flights. These are free lessons that India provides in patience. We have to outlast our tormentors. So I was quite patient. They would have the hearings every month, and I would turn up every month. They said, no, you need not come. No, I will come. So best to do it that way. Otherwise, one can just get so worked up and upset.
Well, you look at it now as an amusing episode, but no, it must have been traumatic at that time, wasn't it?
Not really, not traumatic. But there were, you see, actually what has happened, I feel one of the things that's happened is that even while the individual judges may be very compassionate or nice, that the system as a whole has become completely heartless. That is the problem. I mean, I don't want to get the poor magistrates into trouble, but one of the magistrates who was sort of hearing this case, he would tell me, no, after a while, I'll be sitting at the back and the PN will come and say कि साहब ने कहा है कि 10 minutes के बाद आप उनके chamber में आ जाए. That the magistrate has said, after 10 minutes, please come to his chamber. So I will go, there's a poor rickety little room there. He said, sir, I am so sorry, you have come again. Sir, you please must have tea with me. And so on, and he would say, sir, I know that there is nothing in the case. And in the end, he said that, you see, but if I discharge you just now, then people will say I have taken money. So I said, no, nobody will say you have taken money from me. Please, that much I can assure you. He said, no, sir, they will say you have done it under political influence. So what to do? I mean, you have to appreciate his helplessness in a sense. And, but it is, at the lower level, when you are when you're sitting in the court and you see these other people, and these, elderly person coming, somebody, yahan angutha lagao, put your thumb here, the poor man, put thumb. Then some lady is coming and she doesn't understand anything and thumbs are put and so on, and the consequences may visit them or their children many years later. That is one aspect. But in that very book, I have analyzed the judgments of the Supreme Court. If those judgments were given by anybody, we would laugh our heads off. Even this recent judgment that has been given on the Rafale matter was just lifted from 2.5 pages of the government unsigned, undated note. One sentence after the other. So that is where, then you really lose hope, because we all turn to the Supreme Court thinking, but at least in the end I will get justice. Well, you may or you may not get justice. It's a throw of the dice. So if we were Alok Verma today and we saw what has happened to him, what hope will we have? So it is a very serious issue, and there are ways to make it work, but we can come to that whenever you.
Of particular interest to the Chennai audience is the case of Jayalalitha that you deal with elaborately in this book, pointing out how justice was initially done, then undone, and finally redone by the Supreme Court. Here was a High Court judge who, in acquitting her, made such grave errors that could not have been made innocently. And the question arises how you deal with such judges. Also, the case dragged on for 20 years because of various stratagems used by the accused. But what of the Supreme Court itself? Between the conclusion of the arguments and the final verdict, 7 months had passed, and meanwhile Jayalalitha had died and the case against her had abated. How do you see the role of both the High Court judge and the Supreme Court in this episode?
So the initial judgment by Justice Dekuna was an exemplary forensic examination. And then when it goes to the High Court, firstly the adjournments after adjournments are taken at every level. Dekuna's level, High Court level, then Supreme Court level. No, you must give this give it to us in Tamil. 10,000 pages have to be translated. Then they said, no, the translation is not very good, so you must have an expert who oversees this translation. So discussions on who the expert will be, how he will be selected, that case goes up to the High Court. On every matter, they just kept appealing, and the gentleman who was the Advocate General, a great Advocate General for Karnataka, he says that he could, by the end, write a book on the law of adjournments, of how to procure these. And that the only reason he was not doing it was that he did not want to give further hints to the, to the criminals to do this. But that is what happened. And after Dekuna's examination, the judge who was the Karnataka High Court judge gave an absolutely shameless judgment. Absolutely shameless. You see, the house has been, let us say, constructed. 10,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet, using all sorts of fancy materials, marble, this, that, and the other. now the question is how to value the construction. Because one of the charges was that she has acquired these assets, it is disproportionate to her known sources of income. So now he has to, how will I evaluate per square foot cost of construction? So for that he takes as the basis the sentry box outside. He says it must be the same rate. So he lowers the expenditure there, he inflates the expenditure, income somewhere else, and so on. And the least of it was that there was, you know, if you add 14 and 11, and he will come to some other astronomical figure or under figure and so on. So it was terrible. But one, that the adjournments were allowed, and secondly, that it is not just that after the conclusion of the arguments, the judgment was kept pending for 7 months. The fact of the matter is that on one small point, the appeal was taken to the Supreme Court, and that small point lay with the Supreme Court for 5 years. The court did not decide on that small technical point for 5 years. So the case could not move forward for 5 years. So the Supreme Court, and that who was the Chief Justice at that time, the gentleman who, I forget his name, but the person who's now the governor of Kerala? Yes, he was the Chief Justice. He would always keep assigning this case to one judge. And that judge was so helpful. But that is just one of the cases. I mean, there are many things. Can we get a copy of the book? I'll just like to read one or two. Then you will get a flavor of Madam Justice Anita Gets Bail. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'll, to give you a flavor of what Ravi is talking, I'll read to you. And all the Hindu editors, chairmen, and our, no, don't worry. I'll just open the page. And so there is a, now just see, sub-editors here must pay careful attention. Now it is I have written in this that here is a judgment that please gather some friends and read it aloud. Don't give up halfway, persevere to the end. This is a judgment. And so, first, of course, you know, the so-and-so versus so-and-so court of High Court of Himachal Pradesh, such and such judge presiding. Now the judgment starts. The judgment debtor stroke petitioner, herein, tenant in the demise premises, stands aggrieved by the pronouncement made by the learned executing court upon his objections constituted therebefore, vis-a-vis the execution petition constituted thereat by the decree holder stroke landlord, where within the apposite unfoldments, qua his residence to the execution of the decree, stood discountenanced by the learned executing court. That is the introduction. Now starts the judgment. He says, the learned counsel, appearing for the judgment debtor stroke petitioner, herein submits, qua the impugned pronouncement made by the learned executing court upon the apposite objections preferred therebefore by the J.D. stroke tenant, manifesting therein, qua the decree put to execution therebefore, not warranting recording of affirmative orders thereon, its standing fully satisfied, standing stained with a vice arising from the factum of its palpably slighting the factum of unfoldments, occurring in the relevant record, existing therebefore, comprised in the testification recorded on such and such date in rent petition by such and such by the general power of attorney of the landlord, wherein he made articulations qua all the outstanding arrears of rent, qua the devised premises, standing liquidated by the judgment debtor, excepting conspicuously the ones pertaining to the period commencing from such and such to such and such, whereupon he hence canvassed, qua the executable pronouncement recorded in rent petition number such and such, put to execution before the learned executing court, embodying therein qua the judgment debtor, falling into arrears of rent commencing from this up to the date of payment, standing fully satisfied, satisfaction whereof emanating from the factum of liability of rent, fastened upon the tenant in a verdict recorded in rent petition such and such, standing acquiesced to stand liquidated, more so when the aforesaid verdict stood put to execution, full stop, one sentence. Now, second sentence. This goes on for 4 pages. And there are probably only 4 sentences in the whole judgment. And so, after he had pronounced the judgment, sir, हमारे lawyer हमारे जैसे ही थे, पंजाब से थे, वो कहते सर वो गलत है, ठीक है, मैं जित्या कौन? You are right, but who won? I think. So then so he said, no, Ravi has won. So okay, so then the other side takes the matter to the Supreme Court in appeal. So the Supreme Court says, the Supreme Court says, after hearing learned counsel, it is not possible to comprehend the contents of the impugned order passed by the High Court. The order passed by the High Court is therefore set aside and the matter is remanded to the High Court for fresh consideration on merits. The special petitions are disposed of, the High Court will hear the matter de novo. Now, but the Supreme Court's own judgments are no different. In a famous case about these educational institutions, actually, I should probably read that to you. You see, this was on the rights of minority institutions under Article 39. How much autonomy do they have? So, it went to a 5-judge bench, constitution bench. After hearing these lawyers, they said, no, it should go to a bigger bench. So 7-judge bench. The 7-judge bench said, no, it has to go higher bench. So 11-judge bench. So the 11-judge bench gave a 1,000-page judgment. Nobody could understand it. So 3-judge bench was appointed to find out what is it that the 11-judge... But then nobody could understand what the 3 judges had found. So a 5-judge bench was appointed to find out whether the 3-judge bench had correctly interpreted 11 judges and whether they had exceeded what the 11-judge bench had said. There are several such examples from the Supreme Court. And if you permit me just 1 second more. Because I'm, like everybody else, I'm so immersed in my next book that I've forgotten what I wrote a few months ago in this one. But I can find it by Abdul Datta's name. Rafale. No, not Rafale. Okay, so, you see, they don't see the consequences of the judgments they are giving, most often. So I have argued that you must see the meta consequences of the judgments that you give. And when I was studying judgments that the Supreme Court had handed down on reservations, my friend Arvind Datar, one of your great lawyers here, pointed to certain features and in their context asked me to look up a judgment called Abhay Nath versus the University of Delhi, a judgment delivered in 2009 On reading it, I learned that this judgment had to be delivered to clarify what the court had held 4 years earlier in Buddhi Prakash Sharma versus the Union of India. On reading Buddhi Prakash, I learned that that judgment had to be delivered to clarify what the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court had held in Saurabh Chaudhary versus Union of India in 2003. That judgment, it turned out, had been necessitated by what the court had decreed in Dinesh Kumar 2, as it is known, a judgment delivered in 1986. Dinesh Kumar 2 had to be delivered as the scheme which the court had prescribed the previous year in Dinesh Kumar 1 had led to some untenable situations. That scheme had been prescribed to clarify what the same bench had actually meant by the judgment it had delivered in 1984 in Pradeep Jain versus Union of India. So this is the Supreme Court. And as you rightly say, the same thing can be got through adjournments, and the same results happen. And you can imagine the persons who are litigants, who have come to the court with hope. For 15 years, the court can't decide what the court has decided.
Coming back to the Supreme Court, the court may be supreme but not infallible. One glaring mistake most recently was in the Rafale judgment, where the court had mistaken an explanation of procedure for an accomplished fact. It was under the mistaken impression that the Controller and Auditor General had looked into the Rafale deal and cleared it, and that the report had been submitted to the Public Accounts Committee. We cannot be sure how much this misunderstanding influenced the final verdict, but can you tell us of your experience with the Rafale case, being one of the petitioners?
Yes, you see, in Rafale, the matter is very simple. After about 5 years of analysis of threat perceptions and so on, the Air Force, there's a whole procedure on procurement and so on, and the Air Force had come to an understanding that they require 126 fighter, these multi-combat aircraft, multi-role aircraft, and this would be 8 squadrons of this, so many, this, that, and the other. And then requests for proposals were there. Then there's a whole procedure as to how they will be processed, and then how this is the processing will then result in some final fellows, and then those chaps will be asked to submit tenders, and then in the case of the tenders, the L1 will be selected, and so on. It's a very elaborate thing. And after all that is done, then it goes to a particular committee, then it goes to the Defense Acquisition Committee, then it goes to the Cabinet Committee on Security, and after the Defense Acquisition Committee, the whole thing is set in stone. That is the phrase. You can't change it at all. Nobody can change it. And these procedures have been adopted after very great work since the Kargil War because of the scandals that arose. Ram knows this. These are very detailed procedures. So all this has been gone through. And the 2 weeks before the Prime Minister is in Paris on the 10th of April, 2 weeks before that, the chairman of Dassault, Dassault has been found to be the L1. So they have been chosen, fine. Rafale has been chosen. 126 aircraft have to be done. And the government had said there are 3 objectives. We'll acquire 126 planes. We must acquire the technology to build these planes, and we must build them in India. So only 18 would come in a ready-to-fly condition from France. For the rest, the technology will be transferred to HAL. HAL will make 118, and that is how we will become capable of self-reliant in these matters. On the 10th of April, about 12, 15 days before this 10th of April, the chairman of Dassault is there, the chairman of HAL is there, the head of the Indian Air Force is there, and Trappier, the CEO, says that we are very happy. We've got this, we've got work share agreement with HAL now. I'm sure that the final agreement will be signed very soon. Everything is perfectly fine. 2 days before the Prime Minister is to fly to France, the Foreign Secretary, Jaishankar, he is briefing the press. He is asked about Rafale. He said, no. You see, these details and all are not talked of by the President and Prime Minister and so on. It's a thing there. I'm sure that the agreement will be signed soon. No problem. The discussions have reached a final stage. In the morning, the then President Hollande, he also says, yes, we expect to conclude this very soon. In the evening, Mr. Modi suddenly announces that no, we are not buying 126 planes, we are buying 36 planes in ready-to-fly condition just now. Actually, you are not getting them just now. You are going to get them 6 years later. He had no authority to do it at all. The Defense Minister, our Chief Minister in Parikar did not know. Parikar at that time was opening a fish festival in Goa. He didn't know. Nobody knew. Foreign Secretary did not know. He was accompanying the Prime Minister. But one person knew. Anil Ambani knew. At that time, he had just 1 day before or 2 days before, and you can see the very detailed writ that we filed, they had just registered a company. They had no experience. They did not have land at that time. There was nothing. But as the President of France revealed that Mr. Anil Ambani was a part of the new formula of the Indian government, and we had no choice. So, firstly, there was no authority. No procedure was followed. The requirement of 126 planes was cut to 36 planes. No transfer of technology, no production by HAL. All the objectives were thrown out. And one businessman who has no experience was suddenly brought in. But it didn't end there. Then retrospective amendments, retrospective sanctions began to be given. And we detailed all this to the Supreme Court. And it turned out that the price had, they said, price, can't reveal the price. National security, enemies will come to know. If I tell you that this glass is, 100 rupees, and Ravi says it's 150 rupees, what will you get to know either about the contents of the glass or of the material of which the glass is made? Nothing. So how is price confidential? How will revealing the price show? But these statements started being made. Then we discovered that actually the price had been stated in Parliament by the government. Previous Mirage fitment for making it atomic weapon capable had been stated in the Parliament. And Reliance and Dassault in their annual financial statements had stated the price. And here was the government claiming great secrecy, because if you disclose the price, you will be actually disclosing the weapons packages, the capabilities of the plane, the radar frequencies. How? The problem was that they had first said it is going to be near 650 crores, and it was now 1660 crores per plane. This is the problem. They didn't want to reveal it. But you only have to look at the defense, at the statements of these other companies, and everything was clear. So we took all this to the Supreme Court. First the court said, no, we will not look at the price. No, nobody is questioning Rafale. That's true. We are not questioning Rafale. then they said, we will hear on the price, government will give us some information in a sealed cover. Now, we don't know what the sealed cover was, but the government also gave a 2.5, 3-page unsigned, undated note, which the Attorney General handed to the Supreme Court. The Attorney General, a very fine person, Mr. K. Venugopal, you know, everybody knows he's been your lawyer for a long time, and but he is obviously now in a condition in which he can do little more because of his position than read the government note. And I tell you, it was a very, I was allowed the courtesy of sitting there, listening. The Chief Justice allowed me to speak also, though I have no training in law. So, Justice Joseph asks the Attorney General, well, you say this, but actually the figures show this in your own statement. So the Attorney General is a bit nonplussed, and he says, sir, Your Honor, Your Lordship, it goes on. So the Chief Justice says, no, no, Mr. Attorney, the answer to Brother Joseph's question is in the first line of paragraph 2 of your statement. Read only the first line. He reads, he says, thank you, sir, thank you. Then Joseph asks him 2, 3 other questions, the same thing happens. Then the Chief Justice says, oh, where are is the Air Force here? No, no, sir, they're just coming, sir, they're just coming. So poor 4 or 5 Air Force officers come in their uniform. Oh, thank you for coming. What do you think of the plane? It's a very good plane, sir. You have not acquired any more, there have been no inductions into the aircraft since, into the Air Force since 1985? Yeah, sir. Actually, as you know, Sukhoi has been being manufactured at present in HAL in Bangalore and Nasik and is being inducted into the Air Force. So what do you mean nothing since 1985? No, no, but nothing since 1985, no? So that Air Force looks around to his colleagues, he said, yeah, yes, sir, nothing since 1985. So such leading questions were put. The poor man was quite hesitant in replying, and that was it. And then say, okay, this is go back to your own war room. This is a different war room. Everybody laughed. The Air Force people went. It was just a drama. And I told Prashant that this is only a drama to be able to say in the end that we have listened to everybody, including the Air Force. And that's what happened. In the judgment, yes, Air Force people have said price is right, Air Force people have said this, that, and the other. They never even were asked those questions. We have pointed out about, I do not now remember the count, but the wire has the entire revision petition there. You will see there are such howlers in the whole judgment, one thing after the other, and what you pointed to is just one. He said this price must be confidential, and yet it has been revealed in confidence to the CAG. And the CAG has reported, examined this and submitted his report to the Public Accounts Committee. And the Public Accounts Committee has examined the report of the CAG and has put a redacted portion in the in Parliament, and therefore the price issue, to the extent that it can be revealed, is already in the public domain. Actually, there is no report of the CAG. There is no report of the PAC, Public Accounts Committee. Nothing has been put in Parliament. But they had just lifted this passage from this so-called secret note that they were given and changed. Somebody changed. Even the Supreme Court did not, I mean, somebody has changed because the government had said, this is what happens in the normal procedure, and somebody changed it to mean that it has already happened. And that was the howler which caught the public eye. But that is just one of the many howlers, as we have shown in our revision petition. But the fact of the matter is that this is the condition of the court. And the revision petition is now to be considered by the same 3 judges. It only is Mahatma Gandhi who can say, I have committed a Himalayan blunder. You have to be a Mahatma to be able to acknowledge your error. But the court is in, I had said at that time that we are not on trial. The court is on trial. And the court has already shown that it can't pass even a sub-editor's scrutiny. But what to do? The 5 years' work of the Air Force, after assessing threat perceptions that they need 126 aircraft cut down to 36, that we were to acquire technology thrown out of the door, that HAL was to be given the contract to produce it, and they are producing God knows 10 other planes. Yes, the other question was this Rafale, this Sukhoi 3.5 generation plane, 3.5, 4, 3.5. So the Air Force, sir, 4, no, 3.5, 3.5. 3.5, yes sir, 3.5. In their own air shows, they are saying it is a 5th generation aircraft. But these were the questions, this was the conduct in the open court. So it is a betrayal, if I may say so, of the requirements of national security in the way in which the Supreme Court handled the matter. And let us see now what they will do. We know after the Alok Verma what to expect.
Let me now come to a question that is in the minds of most of us. You have been a supporter and member of the BJP, a minister, close policy advisor to Prime Minister Vajpayee. Prime Minister Modi is obviously very different, but what specifically made you change your mind about the BJP and about Mr. Modi?
Sir, there's no need to change your mind about BJP because there is no BJP now. As I mentioned to you in the morning that there is just 1 3/4 of persons, that is the government and that is the BJP, and that 1 person is Amit Shah and 3/4 of the person is the man who's so busy projecting himself, Mr. Modi. He has no time for doing any work. So 1 3/4, that's all BJP, so you don't have to change your mind about them. But in Mr. Modi's case, I have to confess that it was the second big mistake I made in my life. The first mistake was of supporting Mr. VP Singh. And actually at that time, Cho had rung me up because Cho had a great fondness for Mr. Chandrasekhar. And Chandrasekhar rung him up that ring up your friend. And he told him that ring up your friend, he is supporting this Vishwanath. I have known Vishwanath for 30 years. There is no more deceitful man than this. You tell Arun to, stop doing this. So Cho rang me up that Chandrasekhar says this, that he must be right, you should be careful about VP Singh. So I said, Cho, there is a Russian proverb that when your house is on fire, you can't wait for Ganges water. You have to do with municipal water. So I have never forgotten what Cho said. Cho said, but are you sure it is not petrol? So I never knew that VP Singh, just because he got frightened, we published stories which led to the resignation of Devilal. Then Devilal said, I will now come and have 5 lakh people in Vijay Chowk in Delhi. This fellow panicked, and just 10 minutes. So we'll finish in time, don't worry. VP Singh panicked and announced this Mandal Commission. And that is what has led to so many things, as you know. That was one mistake. In the case of Mr. Modi, I must say I was completely taken in by his, the meetings with him. He used to call me to Ahmedabad with 4 or 5 others. And I did not see, I thought they were harmless errors, when actually I should have recognized them as traits. We have only, we've been warned twice that there are only 10 minutes, so I can give you only one illustration. And I was sharing this with David yesterday. And you see, I was in Ahmedabad for some convocation addressed at some university, and I thought he may take it ill if I have not called on him. So I sent word, I rang up his Jeeves, a man called Sanjay Bhavsar, that I am here. I have nothing to talk with Mr. Modi to take his time. But in case he wants, I will certainly be delighted to call on him. So I called on him. No, aana hai. So I went. So during the conversation, I asked him, you see, at that time, Sonia Gandhi had just gone for that operation to New York. So I said that you have said that the Prime Minister's office has spent 1,300 crores on her operation. Is there some basis for this? Because for 1,300 crores, they can buy a whole hospital while they operation. हाँ, because Indian Express में था. I said, the Hindu won't mind, but I said, only out of habit, but I only read the Indian Express. And in that, I don't think it was there. No, एक second ठहरो. He pressed the button. But somebody came. वो संजय से कहो कि वो भेजे. Indian Express भेजे सोनिया गांधी के बारे में. So the news item was bought, pasted on a piece of paper. I read it. I said कि इसमें तो नहीं है. There is no reference to 1,300 crores. नहीं, PTI की खबर थी. It was a PTI news. And Gujarat की समाचार agencies ने भी दिया है. And the Gujarat समाचार agencies have also said it, put it out. I said, I don't know about PTI, but it so happens that in today's Times of India, Ahmedabad edition, in the 8th column, there is a box item saying that some from Gujarat agency has said that people are saying that we have put out an item that 1,300 crores were spent by the Prime Minister. We have not put out any such item. He said, अरे यही तो मैं कह रहा हूँ. This is what I am saying. आप क्या कह रहे हो? मैंने कब कहा है कि 1,300 करोड़ खर्चे गए? मैंने कहा है कि प्रधानमंत्री का कार्यालय ये स्पष्टीकरण करे कि क्या उन्होंने 1,300 करोड़ खर्चे हैं? That the Prime Minister's office should clarify, have they spent 1,300 crores? I told him, look here, 2 minutes have not passed. You were saying this, and you were giving the hawala of Indian Express, then of PTI, then of Gujarat agencies. Now you say you're not saying it at all? But I took it as a, I did not give it the several such incidents occurred, but I did not see that these are traits. And when after 2, 3, 4 months, I kept quiet for 6 months. But when in 6 months all these things became apparent in governance, his jealousy of expertise, these fabrications, this event management, this gigantism, this fascination for just conspicuous projects, for announcing schemes which are not implemented, people making investment pledges which are not implemented, then I certainly started speaking out, and that was it. It's just facts which led me to change my mind about Mr. Modi. By that time, no need to change my mind about BJP.
One last question before we throw it open to the floor, and that is on tradition versus women's rights. Both in the case of 2 cases, in the case of triple talaq and in the case of Sabarimala, the Supreme Court struck down misogynist traditions that prevented women from exercising their fundamental rights. On the other hand, the attitude of the government has been different. In one case, it came up with the penal law, penal sanction against the outlawed practice. In the other case, it started defending tradition. What would you say on these 2 issues?
Sir, I feel that as far as I have a book called The World of Fatwas. It's on Islamic law. And we must not recognize any personal law of any religion at all, on any matter. I mean, to give you an example from Hindu personal law, we recognize a joint family system, but actually it is just a fiction for tax purposes. There's nothing else. Those joint families owning a lot of property are probably the most disjointed families. They are in litigation and so on. So all such things should be done away with. And even in Islamic law, the Dissolution of Muslim Marriages Act is an act of 1933 of the British. And I have shown in one of my books that many of the clauses in that act were actually done, and the files are still in the archives. The Joint Secretary is noting that they were changed because Jinnah wanted to give his property to such and not to such and such. Under Islamic law, under there's a verse in the Quran on how the property is to be divided, who gets 1/14th, who gets this, who much gets this, and if you total them up, the fractions add up to more than 1. But the position is that it's a British law. So what's so sacred about it? In any case, practices like triple talaq and so on are completely terrorizing male domination, terrorizing poor women. In the same way, actually there is a whole section, I've dealt with the Sabarimala earlier judgment of the High Court of Tamil Nadu as one of the examples of irrationality in our judgments. You will please see that. They say, no, I don't want to create a riot, but you please read that. It's a peculiar judgment. And what is the fundamental belief there? And I'll give you my solution to that. The belief is that the deity is a brahmachari. And if he sees ladies who are between whatever the menstrual ages are, let's say 15 and 55, 10 and 50. So 10 and 50, then he will get so, his vows of brahmacharya may break. So we have so little faith in our deity. So that when itna brahmachari hai, and he can't just see the sight of a lady. And he here is being represented merely by an idol. And the idol is so sensitive, looking around. So, actually speaking, my solution would be different from the women's solution. The women's solution is, yes, we will go there. Good. My solution is, I will never go there. I have actually, I don't quite remember, Rajmohan will correct me, Gopal will correct me, but I think that at least that has been the example in I don't go to temples. If I go because of their great art in them. I meditate by practice Raman Maharishi's prescriptions, I practice by the Buddha's discourses, but I do not go to temples and vihars. If I go only for artistic pleasure. But I think that after Gandhiji went to this Kali temple and saw the goats being sacrificed, and when he went to Kashi Vishwanath and he saw the dirt, the filth, after that he did not take the trouble to go to temples. I think that's the right attitude. If temples are going to be run like this, that some devout person is going to be excluded just because she is a woman, etc., then the best answer is, yes, you keep your temple, we are not going there at all. This is the example that was set by Narayan Guru. Because at that time, untouchables were not being allowed into these temples. And there was a movement to boycott Hinduism at that time. He said, no, we will construct temples of such sacredness and of such beauty that higher caste people will come here. And he revolutionized Kerala in that. So we should have a different response to this, and the Supreme Court or the attitude of the government, they are only doing it for purposes of votes. This thing will get us votes, that thing will not get us votes, therefore. And do something in Delhi and do something else in Kerala. Thank you.
Now to questions. Could you get the mic and then introduce yourself and make it short? Okay, questions brief, please.
So that we are not held guilty as the previous panel was. When it says it is a wrap, means should we close it or should we open it to?
I know, I was looking for the time cues, not.
Mr. Arun Shourie, first question. Sir, you are explaining the status of Supreme Court. The problem is the lack of law or the lack of knowledge in language, or both?
No, sir, the law is very clear. I mean, actually, the laws are very clear. It is the fact that the court does not, the court twists and turns. That is the problem, and individual judges twist and turn. And for a long time, as I pointed out, there was a complete breakdown of discipline in which 2 judges will disregard the judgment of 5 judges and so on. So, what would happen that the outcome of your petition will depend not on the law, not even on your lawyers. It will depend on which judges it went before. That is the problem.
Mr. Arun Shourie, hello?
There, please.
Excuse me. About 7 years or 8 years ago, you had made a brilliant analysis on 2G spectrum in a hall which is just close by here. At that time, I was only 70 years. Okay. Now, that 2G spectrum, the analysis was done in such a way by your expert analysis. You mentioned that the only alternative left for Mr. Raja was to become an approver. Now, why I'm asking this question is, what happened to that case? The prosecution, the chief prosecutor, wife, Indra Singh, we know about that. The chief prosecutor did not attend in spite of the fact he was reminded to come. What ultimately happened? The entire case was destroyed at the Patiala court. Now, of course, if it is appealed there. So taking back to 8 years ago when you made that statement, what do you feel about that kind of judgment which has taken place recently?
No, sir. Actually, Justice, that Judge Saini's judgment is not at fault. Judge Saini has said, in his judgment, he says that I've kept waiting from the morning till the evening for the prosecutor to come and give me the arguments, to give me the evidence. And he just doesn't do that. That shows that how the political convenience of the rulers leads them to present or withhold evidence. But there is actually speaking, the judges are not so helpless. They are culpable in this. In Jayalalitha's case, she is deposed from office, and the case is instituted, and various people give statements, and then she suddenly comes back, and 64% of them resign, and not one person is prosecuted for perjury. In Sahabuddin's case, murder's case, everybody has resigned, and nobody is prosecuted for perjury. So it is, and here again the CBI has not presented the evidence. So that is the position. I am not, now I don't, Raja has got off, and maybe I compliment him, and maybe everything was all right, I don't know. The only thing to which I had taken exception was that Raja kept saying, I have done only what Arun Shourie used to do. So that was not right. But anyhow, the point is that as far as that judgment goes, it is the fact that the prosecution did not present the evidence.
Yes, sir, there.
I am questioning
Sir.
the judges also, the sumo moto and the discrimination of the two power per special. There are, based on the judgment, sumo moto, any petition or close for the judges, any discrimination of the power. After the democracy, why not give the power also, the two power quash? The judges also, the both side for the petition, the petitioner and the respondent side for statement only analyzed. But your himself, why you any discrimination order pass the order? How to quash the both order remove the judges? I am understanding. दो power को नहीं रखना चाहिए. Discrimination and sumo moto.
So the question is that why can't...
Question is sumo moto and discrimination of the judges' power, the special two powers.
So that may be, I don't, sometimes when the cause which is dear to us and the court takes it up suo moto, we applaud the court. When they take up a matter which we don't approve of, we say, oh, why did you do it? There was not even a petition. But may I say one thing? I am becoming very negative about the courts. But I want to tell you a very touching incident. And you will please pardon me for not revealing the name of the judge, because he had sworn me not to do it. See, I got a call one day, I'll finish just with this incident. I got a call one day saying, have you received my, I'm so-and-so? I won't tell you from which high court he was. He said, I'm so-and-so. Have you received my letter? I said, sir, no, I'm sorry, I have not received the letter. He rang up 2 days later. I had not received the letter. Third time he rang up, the letter had come. He said, okay, I'm coming to Delhi, I will meet you. He came. The letter said, you have commented on such and such case and made fun of the judgment on such and such. I am the one who wrote the judgment. And when I wrote the judgment, my colleagues complimented me so much that I was on cloud 9. But on reading your book, I have had second thoughts. And I am sorry that so-and-so, the person had been put into difficulties as a result of the judgment, has been put into difficulties. I have never seen a judge. He came and he personally again repeated all this to me, and he said, but never revealed my letter. Now, recently, he wrote a second letter to me that I must tell you, I called that person. I told him that I was wrong. I am so wrong that I wronged you. And that poor person broke down saying, sir, that because of your judgment, my promotion was held up and all this, and I have been put into... And now that he has taken steps to undo the wrong that was done to that happened to fall upon that person. So in the judiciary, we also have such honorable people. We must always remember that. But the cure to all that, to sifting the dishonorable from the honorable, is for each of us to study the judgments. For the reporters, to study the judgments. Don't just say, Ravi has won and Arun has lost. That's not the point. Study the judgment and comment on it in an academic way so that the judges know that they are being watched. That is the way to ensure accountability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arun Shourie, for sharing your thoughts with us twice over in today's Lit Fest. Thank you.